Chapter 826, Underground Gladiatorial Match. Had it been in the Immortal world, Tang Xiao wouldn't have believed it if this water progenitor stone was sold as jewelry, but this was Earth. Tang Xiao had seen too many precious treasures in this world that were sold by ordinary people as regular objects. Where else can I buy this thing? Tang Xiao took a deep breath and turned to look at Hao Lei. Only then did Hao Lei finally realize that Tang Xiao's expression was unusual. She was surprised and glanced at the heart of the ocean again before slowly answering, "To the best of my knowledge, there's only one such aqua crystal of this quality. There have been several amethyst crystals in existence, the most famous of which is the Gem of Rose, owned by the Kingdom of Great Britain's royal family and is currently in the Queen's crown. Unfortunately, that treasure is not for sale no matter how much is offered." Tang Xiao's eyes shimmered, and he nodded and said, "Help me pay attention to the world's top crystals or gems. If they are of this quality or better, contact me immediately. Also, I'll take this heart of the ocean as it's very important to me. For this heart of the ocean to be fancied by you is truly a blessing for us, boss," replied Hao Lei with a smile. Inside an exclusive cafe near the Grand Fortune Jewelry's edifice, Qi Chengxing drank his coffee with a soulless expression. Even he didn't pay attention to the goddess he had been trying to court for a long time, who was now sitting across from him. The unexpected encounter with Tang Xiao had made him shudder in fear, though it was fortunate that Tang Xiao didn't embarrass him nor make things difficult. He knew that even if he didn't lose his life, he would at least have a layer of his skin peeled off. Undoubtedly, the issue came up because he didn't remember that the Grand Fortune jewelry was Tang Xiao's business. He only suddenly recalled it the moment he saw Hao Lei. Recalling such a thing made him decide that he would never go to Grand Fortune jewelry to buy anything ever again. He even made up his mind to never approach 2 kilometers around Grand Fortune jewelry or the Everlasting Feast Hall, so as not to encounter this fiend, this evil star, ever again. "Hey, Chengxin, you look out of sorts, you know." Yang Hui stirred the sugared coffee with a spoon while she wore a strange expression on her pretty face. Her tone sounded casual, yet had some intention to it. Qi Chengxing raised his head and bitterly replied, "I wouldn't be scared like this even if I were to encounter the richest man in Hong Kong, Li Jiren. It can be said that there's only one person who can scare me. Only one. Who's exactly this a one?" Yang Hui squinted and quickly asked. Qi Chengxing was silent for a few seconds. He secretly glanced around and found that no one was paying attention to them. He then lowered his voice and answered, "Little Hui, you must not tell this to another soul, else I'll be damned to die." "I promise no one will know what you're gonna tell me," said Yang Hui immediately with all seriousness. "Nobody else will learn it from my mouth. His name is Tang Xiao, the big boss behind Grand Fortune Jewelry and the Everlasting Feast Hall," Qi Chengxing whispered. "Also, you should have heard about what happened to Jiang Yu, Chen Fei, and Du Yang, right?" Yang Hui's eyes instantly turned into saucers as she exclaimed in alarm, "Their industries were struck with accidents last year. The rumors I heard was that they had offended a very powerful person and ended up with bad luck." "That's right, there was still your Qi family too." "Huh, don't tell me, it all was because of what he did." "Of course, it's him, all right?" Qi Chengxin forced a bitter smile and said, "I'm afraid that he's the only one who can do that in all of China. My Qi family is quite fine as we only lost 2 billion. But the other 3, damn it, I might as well tell you. 4 of us offended Tang Xiao that time and lost 20 billion, at the very least." Gasp. Yang Hui knew what 20 billion yuan meant. Even if her Yang family was also a major family in Hong Kong with a lot of assets and industries in other places, the total assets they owned was just half of that, 10 billion. As day blended into night, Tang Xiao had dinner with Hao Lei while Mo arrived in Hong Kong with the other 10 of his bodyguards and called him. Tang Xiao was then escorted by Hao Lei in her car to Hong Kong airport. "Can I go with you too, boss?" asked Hao Lei, eyes full of expectation. "You can't." Tang Xiao shook his head and smiled. Just stay well in Hong Kong and do your best to process that 5 tons of jade and sell them. I expect that I'll need a lot of them in September, so I hope that this plan won't delay what I've planned by then. All right, no problem. Hao Lei heavily nodded. It would take 6.5 hours to fly from Hong Kong to Tel Aviv. If they took off at 2000 hours, they would arrive in Tel Aviv around 3:30 in the middle of the night. Tang Xiao used his small green book so that he could take the flight all by himself with no other passengers, leaving only 12 people in the passenger plane. Tel Aviv was Israel's second-largest city and was a modern international metropolis inhabited by 400,000 people, adjacent to the eastern Mediterranean Sea. It boasted 51.76 square kilometers of an urban area. The location of the labor camp 1319 was not in downtown Tel Aviv but was in Bat Yam, one of the surrounding urban clusters. Bat Yam was only inhabited by a few 100,000 people and had a strong economy. Even though it was slightly worse compared to some third-tier cities in China, it was still comparable to many county towns under municipalities. The labor camp 1319 was located more than a dozen kilometers southeast of Bat Yam. It covered a large area and looked like a strong castle from the outside. Early in the morning, Tang Xiao and his men checked in their lodging at the highest-rated hotel in Bat Yam City. Mo Ao, who had been here before, was very familiar with this small town. On the 5th floor of the hotel, Tang Xiao was standing before the window, looking toward the southeast, and asked, "Tell me what you think, Ao." "The current top official of the labor camp 1319 is not the one we met that time, boss," said Mo Ao. "I've contacted my former business partner on the way here. He's a powerful underworld gang leader in Tel Aviv, Gus Gillis. He told me that the new top dog in the labor camp 1319, Agostino, is a particularly greedy man. This guy has been involved in some shady dealings to make some money recently, so it will be harder than in the past if we want to buy a large number of inmates from the labor camp. He's using the inmates in the prison to amass money?" "How did he do it?" asked Tang Xiao, surprised. "The gladiatorial fights to the death," answered Mo Ao. Tang Xiao frowned. He suddenly remembered the trailer he had seen at the movies. The inmates from many prisons were gathered together for the underground fight to the death tournaments, in which many rich people secretly came to the match arena through shady channels to have some unrestrained gambling. If the situation was like in the movies, Tang Xiao realized that it would be tough to buy the world's top hitman, Specter, with just $100 million. "Tell me your idea, then," said Tang Xiao calmly and then lit up a cigarette. "I think you should first meet our former partner, this Gus Gillis," said Mo Ao. "He's one of the best in doing a deal like buying inmates. But this guy is also a greedy man, so it's going to cost more if we don't want to expose our identity." Tang Xiao pondered for a short while before he nodded and said, "It does inconvenience for us to act openly on this issue." "You're right. Let's use the local scoundrels to do things for us. It will only cost us a bit more at most, yet will save us the trouble of getting exposed and implicated later." "Where's this Gus Gillis now?" "He's in Tel Aviv." "Can you make him come over?" asked Tang Xiao. "Make arrangements to meet him." "No problem." Mo Ao said with a smile, "Gus Gillis doesn't know about our true identity, but he does understand our strength. He won't dare offend us." Tang Xiao nodded and motioned for Mo Ao to contact Gus Gillis before he mulled over the issues silently. He brought $1 billion this time, but he had no idea how many inmates he could buy. He also had to consider some other issues as well. He'd have to implement another plan if $1 billion couldn't do the job. But the plan was dangerous, even the slightest mistake could lead to suppression from the army of Tel Aviv's authority. There was also another issue. He must see these inmates before he purchased them. He decided to enter the prison as a prisoner first if possible while he waited for the designated inmates to be purchased. Then, he would negotiate with the prison's top dog, Agostino. As the afternoon came, four black SUVs roared as they came to the hotel that Tang Xiao was residing in. Several big, strong men protected a middle-aged man in a white suit and sunglasses who got off from the third black SUV. The middle-aged Caucasian man had a shaved head with a tattoo on his left cheek and neck. After Mo appeared with the other two bodyguards at the hotel's entrance, Gus Gillis grinned and strode toward him. "I'm so glad I can meet you again here in Bat Yam, buddy. You're still as robust as in the past, even after so many years." Mo smiled back and hugged him, then smilingly said, "You also look a lot younger, Gus. You've been in control of a mafia that dominates Tel Aviv's underworld. Does that make your life more comfortable or something?" "Bah, ignore that nonsensical shit people have been spitting out, woo." Gus Gillis shook his head and smiled. "I'd wake up laughing if I really could rule the entire underworld of Tel Aviv. It's a pity that today's youngsters are getting more powerful, even I got done in quite badly by a bunch of those brat bastards." "Tell me something, is there anything I can help you with?" asked Mo with a curious yet quaint smile. Gus Gillis squinted his eyes and observed the two men behind Mo. Then he immediately said with a smile, "Take it easy, buddy. It's just that I'm quite curious. What kind of big shot can make you his subordinate? By the way, I've got another question too. Where's your dear little brother, Win? Why don't I see him with you?" "That younger brother of mine is carrying out another mission, so he didn't come with me," said Mo with a smile. "As for our boss, you better act respectfully when you meet him, man. It's not only because he has a lot of more powerful men than me, but he's also a powerful terror himself." "No kidding, man." Gus Gillis was astounded. "Can you tell me again where you hail from, woo?" The smile on Mo's face receded a lot. He approached Gus Gillis and whispered in his ear, "If you have the force comparable to the Stygian clubs, it's fine for me to tell you, else it might as well harm you instead." Chapter 827, Promotion for Power and Fortune. Gus Gillis was someone who had seen many terrible figures he shouldn't provoke, yet he had only a sliver of dread toward those people. At this moment, however, he suddenly felt a chill down his spine, and his curiosity died out instantly. The Stygian Club. The name was a legend. A legendary organization he had heard of that boasted terrifying power and influence. He could clearly infer from Mo's words that his boss had the strength to fight against the Stygian Club. After taking a deep breath, Gus Gillis concealed his feeling with a smile. It was a stiff smile, but it clearly expressed his understanding. "Well, let's just forget about it if it's inconvenient. Anyway, I still don't get something. Why would your boss want to see me? Is it like last time, you want some inmates from Labor Camp 1319? Don't be rushed, take it easy about that, Gus," said Mo. "Wait until you meet my boss, you'll naturally know what his intention is." A few minutes later, Mo took Gus Gillis to the room where Tang Xiao was staying. Even though Gus Gillis was quite surprised upon finding out how young Tang Xiao is, he acted more respectful and exchanged some pleasantries with Tang Xi. He then asked about the doubt that plagued his mind. "Boss Tang, I don't think you brought me here just to have a chat, right? Please speak directly about if there's anything I can do for you. I'll never refuse it as long as it's within the scope of my ability." "All right. How much do you know about Labor Camp 1319? asked Tang Xiao. "Also, are you familiar with the top official of this prison?" "Boss Tang, you should have heard from Wu that I was once detained in this Labor Camp 1319. Gus Gillis nodded and said, "It was very fortunate that I had amassed quite a fortune before I was detained and I was able to buy my freedom. Hence, I know quite a lot about the situation inside the prison. As for Augustino, I have had some dealings with him a few times, one of which regarding his secretly arranged underground gladiatorial death matches. If that's true, how about doing some business with me?" asked Tang Xiao with satisfaction. "What business?" asked Gus Gillis. "I'll pay $20 million for your work." You help me purchase a batch of inmates from Labor Camp 1319. Also, find a way to send me inside and give me a week there. I'll give you a list of inmates I'll buy by then. You want to buy a group of prisoners from there? Not just one. Gus Gillis was shocked. There's no need to fly in from afar and come here personally if I just wanted to buy one prisoner, said Tang Xiao lightly. I want to buy a batch of these prisoners, no less than 100 of them. That's impossible, bluntly exclaimed Gus Gillis. Even if Agostino is the highest commander of the Labor Camp 1319, he wouldn't dare to sell you so many major criminals. Let alone 100 inmates, he probably doesn't have the guts to sell more than a dozen of them. Tang Xiao frowned and asked, does he have insufficient authority, or is he under the surveillance and control of someone else? It's not a major problem for Agostino to have dozens of heavy convicts for sale with his authority, but the crux of the problem is, the prisoners detained in the Labor Camp 1319 are all extremely horrible. Releasing tens of them rather casually will do great harm to society. Agostino is sure to worship money like his life, but he would never try to seek death that recklessly either. So, you mean he's too afraid of selling so many prisoners, said Tang Xiao. It's out of fear that the sold convicts will make a major disaster outside, eventually causing trouble for him? That's right, answered Gus Gillis. Tang Xiao squinted and thought about the issue silently. He felt that Gus Gillis made sense. Had it been himself in the position of the highest-ranking officer of Labor Camp 1319, he wouldn't take such a big risk for money either. But if he didn't try, wouldn't his effort in coming here go to waste? Or, should he really resort to putting that very dangerous plan into motion, creating riots to help those convicts escape secretly? I have an idea, boss, interjected Jing all of a sudden. You do? Tell me. Tang Xiao was surprised. A cold gleam suffused in Jing's eyes as he explained with all seriousness. It's highly likely that Agostino won't dare to sell us so many prisoners. It's better to contact the camp's second in charge. If he's willing to sell a lot of inmates to us, we'll help him remove Agostino, though it will be up to his own efforts if he wants to sit on top of the food chain in the prison. Not bad. Tang Xiao clapped and smilingly said with satisfaction, that's a good idea. If the number 2 character is not an idiot, he will cooperate with us. Gus Gillis, who's second in charge in Labor Camp 1319. Gus Gillis thought for a moment and answered, Sander. Do you have a way of contacting him to arrange for us to meet in secret? Asked Tang Xiao. I'm one of Agostino's VIP guests, so Sander will give me some face. Gus Gillis nodded. Boss Tang, if you really have the money and the capital to remove Agostino, you can meet Sander and I'm sure he'll agree to a deal with you. But what? Asked Tang Xiao with pressed brows. But, can we have some changes in our deal? Asked Gus Gillis seriously. I don't want money, just your help with an issue of mine. Do tell. What kind of problem do you have? Asked Tang Xiao. I'd like you to eliminate 4 people after your plan is successful, said Gus Gillis. They are gang leaders in Tel Aviv and quite powerful. Tang Xiao didn't immediately answer his request, but instead asked with a pale smile, you want us to kill the other 4 gang leaders so that you can become the kingpin or godfather of Tel Aviv's underworld? That's right. As long as those 4 are eliminated, those under them will cause trouble. It is highly likely that there will be internal struggles for the leader position. When they fight to the death, it will be the time for me to act. I have 70 to 80% of confidence that I'll be the godfather of all of Tel Aviv's underworld, that is, once they die. All right. Deal. Tang Xiao nodded. Seeing Tang Xiao agree so quickly was not something Gus Gillis expected, so he immediately said excitedly, I'll contact Sander then. I'll personally inform you after the time and place are determined. All right. Tang Xiao sent Gus Gillis to leave with his gaze before he waved to Jing and said, follow him in secret and monitor his actions. If you find him backstabbing us, or doing some shitty trick to expose us, kill him directly. Understood. Jean sure nodded cautiously and went out silently. Labor Camp 1319. In the northernmost part of the prison, there was a 6-story building with a wide and spacious hall at the bottom. An arena platform, or rather a fighting ring, had been set up in the hall. 2 fighters were wearing big boxers and were engaged in a grueling fight on the ring, while hundreds of people sat in the surroundings. Commander Agostino, who do you think will win the final? A foreign man in a suit and shiny shoes was smoking a cigar, spoke in a relaxed manner as he asked casually, puffing out smoke as he spoke. The highest official of Labor Camp 1319, Agostino, still wore an obsequious smile and said, Mr. Newark, the number 6 Fleshgrinder and number 3 Thanatos are very powerful experts in our prison. Fleshgrinder has a record of 4 wins from 4 fights, but Thanatos also has 5 wins and 1 draw from 5 fights. I can't tell which one of them will become the final winner from their fight. Newark pointed to Thanatos and slowly said, I think Thanatos will be the ultimate winner. He hasn't used the weapon he's good at so far, and his opponent hasn't been able to push him too hard. That Fleshgrinder, though, didn't you see that he's very powerful but a little too sluggish? Agostino nodded with a pensive look a few times and then said, I think you're right, Mr. Newark. I hope he can win the last game too. Else, I'll lose quite a sum of money that I've bet. Newark was the leader of an arms dealer who controlled arms trafficking through various channels in Israel. Rumors had it that he was very close with the state. He was also the main supporter behind Agostino becoming the highest-ranking official of the Labor Camp 1319, by pouring in a lot of money to help him. In the fights between experts, any negligence or mistakes will cost them their lives. More so that the situation in combat is rapidly changing. Nobody can say who will be the ultimate winner now, Newark nodded. Suddenly, Sander, who was sitting on the chair next to Agostino, took out his mobile and was surprised to see the caller shown on its screen. It was because the person who called him turned out to be Gus Gillis, the most powerful gang leader in Tel Aviv. What does he want from me? Sander didn't want to talk to Gus Gillis, but it was hard to not to at this time. He quickly glanced at Agostino, then bent over and stood up to leave the spectator area and run outside. As he found a remote spot, he picked up the phone and spoke, Gus Gillis, shouldn't you take the initiative to find Agostino? Why are you calling me? It's your promotion. It's quite a good thing to have more power and fortune, don't you think? I wonder if you're interested. Gus Gillis's voice was heard from the phone. Sorry, I don't get what you mean, answered Sander, frowning. There's no need for you to understand it for the time being. You just need to remember to cooperate with me. Not only can you be promoted to the highest ranking position in Labor Camp 1319, but you can also earn yourself quite a fortune, said Gus Gillis with a smile. I'll arrange the time and place for you to meet with someone around midday tomorrow. Chapter 828, Friendship Grows from the Exchange of Blows. Sander's eyes sparkled while he held his mobile phone. He knew what Gus Gillis's identity was, and he didn't have much trust in the ruthless gang leader, but Gus Gillis's words piqued his interest nonetheless. He did love money, but he liked being the highest-ranking official of Labor Camp 1319 more. He was sure that being the top dog in the prison was equivalent to a steady stream of fortune that would enter his pocket. I'll go. After careful consideration, Sander finally gave Gus Gillis his answer. Noon of the next day. In a remote neighborhood in Bat Yam, there was an inconspicuous cafe where Sander met Gus Gillis, who arrived ahead of him. After dismissing the 2 trusted aides who had been following him for years, Sander sat alone across from Gus Gillis. He lit up a cigarette and asked, Mr. Gillis, I'm a candid man and I love to have dealings with similar people. What matter do you want to meet me about? Don't worry, Warden Sander. I was looking for you for a good reason, replied Gus Gillis with a smile. Though it's not me who wants to meet you today, as I'm just a middleman between you and the said person. And this said person is, asked Sander with slightly creased brows. It doesn't matter much who is, honestly. What matters is that he can give you what you want. Gus Gillis shook his head and said, for instance, power and fortune. Sander fell into silence, but his curiosity was piqued even more. Who was that person? What was his purpose and objective? He had already prepared for danger when he went out this time. He decided to only agree with the opposite party temporarily if their demand was too excessive. If the worst came to the worst, he would just leave the cafe and go back on his words later. I'm not late, am I? Tang Xiao greeted in fluent English after he arrived soon after. Gus Gillis immediately stood up and introduced him. You're not late, Mr. Tang. Let me introduce you to the Vice Warden of Labor Camp 1319, Mr. Sander. Mr. Sander, this is Mr. Tang, the person who plans to cooperate with you. Tang Xiao reached out and shook hands with Sander, then gestured for them to sit down. He took a seat next to Gus Gillis and smilingly said, I'm sure Warden Sander must be very curious as to why I want to meet you. It's very simple. I want to make a deal with you. Sander looked at the Oriental young man with gleaming eyes as he asked, what deal, exactly? Tang Xiao didn't hurry to answer, but instead raised his arm to quickly make a gesture to Mo, who came from the distance carrying a briefcase. When he put the briefcase on the table, he opened it, showing it full of stacks of US bills. There are $1 million here, Warden Sander. It's all yours, no matter if we can agree or not today. Just consider it a gift upon our first meeting. Sander's expression changed. $1 million was not a large sum of money to him as he had more than 10 million US dollars himself, but he was impressed by Tang Xiao's move nonetheless. As he was about to speak, his eyes inadvertently glanced over at Mo's face. Impossible. Sander abruptly got up from the sofa with eyes gleaming. He was flustered and horrified as he stared at Mo. It's been a long time since we last met. Isn't that right, Warden Sander, said Mo with a smile. Have your injuries been all right? I thought the death god liked you and would take you away, though. Sander glared at Mo and chilling killing intent oozed out of his teeth. That was the wrong guess. The death god never likes me and with my good luck, I can still live up till now. But I still clearly remember the dagger you used to leave the stab wounds to the left of my chest back then. If it wasn't for my heart being positioned slightly different from other people's, I would have probably died by your hands. We were also trying to survive, scraping along the line of life in those years, and you were our enemies. Mo smiled and said, but now, my boss wants to make a deal with you, so we are enemies no longer. I, for one, love the saying that all hustles and bustles in the world are nothing if not for profits. There's no eternal enemy in the world, only perpetual interests, don't you think so? What I currently want to know the most is, how big is this reward, replied Sander in a deep voice. Tang Xiao waved to Mo, motioning him to wait while speaking with a smile. I didn't expect that and Warden Sander would share some history together. Well, with no fists exchanged, none would get acquainted, right? As for the benefits and how much you'll get, I must say that it will depend on how much courage you have. Speak clearly, please, asked Sander after taking a seat again. No. What I can tell you now is that as long as you have enough courage, our deal can reach the hundreds of millions, then add dollars after the millions. Tang Xiao shook his head. Hundreds of millions in US dollars? Sander's heart beat faster, and the anger on his face gradually dissipated. After more than 5 seconds, he was widely grinning as he spoke, Mr. Tang, isn't it? Tell me more about our cooperation. I want to buy inmates from Labor Camp 1319. Quite a lot of them, in fact, said Tang Xiao. The number, well, the minimum number of inmates I want to buy will be in the 3-digit range. Hundreds of people? Sander's pupils contracted. He couldn't help but tremble, tempestuous waves ricocheting in his heart and fear filling his eyes as he stared at Tang Xiao. One must note that each convict in Labor Camp 1319 was a ruthless, wicked, and evil person, a heavy offender who had acted multiple times. Sanders' pupils contracted while his body couldn't help but be stunned. His heart was filled with turbulent waves, and Tang Xiao's eyes were full of fear. It is important to note that the prisoners in Labor Camp 1319, each of whom is a wicked person, are the villains who have been shot many times. What is it? Why would the young man buy so many prisoners? Is he going to form a terrorist organization? Sander was at a loss on how to reply, or really, he didn't dare. Money was a good thing, more so that the more than $100 million was an astronomical sum for him. Yet, he had to be alive to spend them, didn't he? By observing Sanders' expression, Tang Xiao could tell what his thoughts were. A charming smile appeared on his handsome face as he said, "I know that you're afraid, Warden Sander. But the selling of inmates would not only not implicate you, but it will also pave the way for you to become the highest-ranking officer of Labor Camp 1319. So, what do you think about such an outcome?" Sanders' eyes lit up and he inquired more, "You have a way to achieve that?" "I'll send someone to kidnap Agostino before we have our deal set in motion," said Tang Xiao with a smile. "Then you can use his name to trade with me. After the transaction is over, immediately report to the government and I'll send my men to evacuate Agostino, change his appearance, and become a runaway fugitive. Agostino then will die in a fierce battle. Dead men tell no tales, they leave no traces nor witness of what has happened. Making Agostino take all the blame, a scapegoat?" Countless thoughts swirled inside Sanders' mind. The more he thought about it, the brighter his eyes were. After a long while, he finally voiced his last concern, "How can I believe that you have this ability? Agostino loves money, but he's also very cautious and prioritizes his life more. He usually brings at least a few experts to protect his safety whenever he goes out." Tang Xiao pointed to Moa nearby and smilingly said, "What if I tell you that I brought a group of experts when I came to Bat Yam this time and their strength is similar to Moa's? What do you think? Do you think I can do it?" "That bastard, huh?" Sander cursed inwardly before he finally nodded and said, "That man of yours is particularly strong. I know his strength since I fought him once." "All right, let's make a good plan of action then," concluded Tang Xiao with a smile. Time fleeted by and 2 days had passed in the blink of an eye. Inside the Labor Camp 1319, Agostino was resting comfortably on the soft sofa, enjoying the service of a blonde beauty, while Sander took a file and placed it on the table in front of him. Agostino casually took it and glanced at the file a few times. He grabbed a pen and signed his signature. He then threw the document to Sander and said, "A total of 13 people, you'll handle all of them. Keep in mind to cross-check their situation first. If you find their hands stretched out took sticky, do inform me at once." "I'll do it right away." Sander nodded. Agostino stopped Sander, then pulled the drawer out, took out 2 stacks of bills. He threw them to Sander and said, "Give these $20,000 to our men as their share and tell them to work well. As for your share, it's already in your account." Sander nodded with a smile and headed out of the office. His expression turned cloudy after he came outside. Every time he got his share, it was only $50,000 at the most. Comparing to Agostino, who received hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars, it couldn't even be compared. Such an amount of money, isn't it just a sum given to a fucking beggar? Sander cursed inwardly and glanced around. There was no one in the corridor at this time, so he took a pen out of his pocket and quickly added a name to the list of 13 prisoners, Richard. 10 minutes later, he appeared in the room where the 14 prisoners had just been sent. He watched the 14 of them being tortured on the iron fence. His eyes finally fell on Tang Xiao, and then said to the guard next to him, "Take this Richard out and put him in room number 18. The rest should go in the back cell." The prison guards immediately released Tang Xiao's handcuffs and took him out of the room. A young black man among the 13 inmates shouted, "Hey, dude. Why did you put him in cell 18? Do you want to make fucking money out of him? How much? $10,000 dollars? $100,000 dollars. I got money too. Just put me with him in cell 00018. Shut the fuck up, damn Blackie. Sander angrily shouted back with a change in complexion. The inmates in cell 18 are those who got sentenced for at least 200 years. I can kick you there if you want to die quickly. Hiss, the young black man gasped and instantly shrunk. Tang Xiao stopped and turned to look at the black young man and suddenly asked, "What crime have you committed, buddy?" "Mind your fucking business." The black youth stood ramrod and cursed. "Tell me what his crimes are." Tang Xiao looked at Sander. Sander lifted the document and read it. Subduing, set fire to destroy 16 stores and burnt 9 people alive. Robbed jewelry stores, killed 3 people and severely injured 4 more in the process, broke out from prison twice, separately from. Chapter 829, A Wise Man Knows When to Retreat. Hearing Subduing's criminal record piqued Tang Xiao's interest a bit. It seemed like this guy should be sentenced for a few hundred years, judging by his criminal record. How many years is his sentence? Tang Xiao interrupted Sander and asked with a pale smile. Sander glanced at Subduing and lightly said, "With such heavy crimes, he's been sentenced to 260 years. He's quite interesting, I think, and should be suitable to stay in cell 18. Tang Xiao smiled and said, "Warden, how about you stretch the rules and put him in the same cell with me?" "All right, take him to the cell 18, too." Sander nodded. "Trash this brat first if he's crossing the line." Immediately after, the 13 people including Subduing looked at Tang Xiao with a weird expression. They really couldn't tell something. Is this guy a fellow convict or the boss of this prison? This fellow convict just talked with the warden, and the latter actually listened to him? The few prison guards who were with Sander were the latter's trusted men. Although they didn't understand why their immediate superior would listen to a prisoner, they still immediately released Subduing's handcuffs and pushed him to follow behind Sander and head outside. They walked along the corridor with many gates. The longer they passed through the corridor, the heavier guarded it was with tighter security. As they walked halfway through, the group took the elevator to the 4th floor and walked down the dark corridor to the end. They then found prison cell 18. When the steel door to the cell opened, Tang Xiao and Subduing were pushed inside. "This is your place now. I'll come to teach you every day," said Sander with some deep, mysterious meanings in his words. He deeply looked at Tang Xiao and then immediately ordered the prison guard to close the door and lock it from the outside. There were 4 prisoners inside the cell already. But Tang Xiao couldn't believe that there was a woman among them. The woman had the muscles of a bodybuilder and looked exceptionally robust and stocky. There was a fierce scar on the left cheek of her rough face that looked like a poisonous scorpion. As for the other 3, one was a middle-aged man who boasted a burly and stocky physique with a lot of tattoos on his body. Even 2/3 of his naked arms were fully covered in tattoos. There was also a thin old man with white hair, seemingly in the last years of his life. However, although the 2 dumbbells in his hands were at least tens of kilograms, they looked very light in his hands that were continually lifting and putting them down. The last one was a gentle-looking young man around 25 years old. He wore gold-rimmed glasses and sat in the innermost corner of the cell reading a book. He didn't even look up, nor did he blink, when Tang Xiao and Subduing were sent inside. How interesting. 2 prisoners were sent to our cell at once. This is the first time in history, the burly man, who sat on the bunk, stroked his chin and grinned. Tang Xiao observed the 4 people before he finally shifted his sight to Subduing and smilingly said, "Well, I heard that the first thing that happens when someone first arrives at a cell is that the old inmates will haze them with beatings. Judging from their looks, you'll probably suffer from beatings and bruises, mate." Subduing angrily glared at Tang Xiao and clenched his fist, which emitted cracking sounds from his bones. He then grimly said, "Brat, I think I need to teach you a lesson before we get beaten then." No way those fucking guards sent me to this cell if it wasn't because of your dirty fucking trick, asshole. Slap. Tang Xiao just raised his hand and slapped Subtanch's face in response to his words. Before the fellow was able to respond, he pulled him into the air and smashed him into a single bed a few meters away and spoke casually. Me taking you here is actually good for you, bastard. Don't swear at me before you figure out how else I'll make you learn to be docile and obey me. Having said that, he looked at the other few people who had surprised faces as they watched him, and then said, well, I'm a newcomer here and I'll probably disturb you all for a few days. The name is Xiao. The four of you, why don't you introduce yourselves to me? The burly man wore a bit of a serious expression when he looked at Tang Xiao. He saw Tang Xiao's beat Subtanchu a while ago with a speed that secretly shocked him inside. He was also a ruthless man and once killed a tiger bare-handed. He even fought with polar bears to the death, and the number of enemies that died to his hands for decades was numbered in the tens of people. Yet, he could very well see that the oriental young man in front of him was definitely an expert. Xiao, eh? That's a very interesting name, and you're also very powerful. If you can knock Emily down, it will prove that you have the ability to make us introduce ourselves to you. The bodybuilder-like female convict coldly snorted and interjected discontentedly. Your balls shrink after seeing a powerful expert, K2? To think that you're pushing me to beat him, do you find it interesting or something? Well, my balls are indeed shrinking back to my stomach in front of you, Emily. K2 grinned and said, spare the nonsense and just play with him, will you? Let us see which of you can stand and have the right to talk. Emily rolled her eyes and immediately looked at Tang Xiao, then hooked her index finger and said without being salty, that shit tried to see us have some play, so I might as well use it as a warm-up. I definitely won't break your legs, brat. But as for your hands, that will depend on my mood. If I must fight you all, only that old man is worth a fight. As for you, though, I think it's better for you to forget it. Tang Xiao shook his head indifferently. The white-haired old man let out a pale smile that contained meaning. Do you really want to fight me, child? You want to bully this Gramps? Well, it's better to bully you than beat these few weak people, don't you think? Tang Xiao smiled. Emily seemed to have been insulted by the words. She roared and instantly hurled toward Tang Xiao. Her speed was extremely fast, almost comparable to the martial arts grandmaster level. Her howling fist appeared in front of Tang Xiao in a blink of an eye and attempted to knock down Tang Xiao. Crack! Tang Xiao reached out and grabbed her fist. He then followed with a seemingly light punch that instantly smashed Emily's face. The latter screamed as the blow sent her backward over 6 meters away, and she fell heavily on the bed of the youth who was reading a book. The pupils of the white-haired old man contracted and the smile on his face instantly vanished. He watched Tang Xiao with a solemn look and said after taking a deep breath, "You're very powerful indeed, Xiao. Not even I can become your opponent since I can't beat Emily in just one strike. Alright, I'll introduce myself to you. You can call me Old Angie." Old Angie? The information about the inmates in this cell from the file that Sander gave him appeared in Tang Xiao's mind. The report said that this old Angie was once a mercenary, a terrifying character who had gone through hails of bullets from fierce battlefields, yet he still lived for decades. It was said that the number of people he had killed was definitely in the hundreds. It's really a pity that you're too old to fight the enemies. You can only be a guard at the nursing home now. Tang Xiao spoke out some words that the old Angie couldn't figure out. He then stared at the youth who never looked up and lightly said, "You should be an Asian given your looks. Which country are you from?" The young man raised his head for the first time while his fingers held his glasses. He let out a shy smile at Tang Xiao and answered, "China." The name is Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua? Information regarding him appeared in Tang Xiao's mind. This guy was the world's top hacker who created the most terrifying virus on the internet, the Spider, which paralyzed the network in some European country for 4 days and indirectly caused a few billions of dollars in losses. The file also noted that he should possess special abilities since he could kill 29 people by himself. Plus he destroyed 16 buildings, which led to more than 140 people being injured. "Can you let me see your special abilities, Tang Xiao?" asked Tang Xiao in Mandarin. A suspicious look appeared on Tang Xiao's face. He put down the book in his hand, then leaned on the wall and looked at Tang Xiao as he asked, "You're also a Chinese?" "I am." Tang Xiao nodded. "How do you know that I have special abilities?" asked Tang Xiao curiously. "The whole prison detains 1,260 convicts and I've read each inmate's criminal records, including yours," answered Tang Xiao. Tang Xiao looked empty and he asked quizzically, "The information on the inmates of this prison should be top secret. There are only a few outsiders who can view it apart from the highest-ranking officials of this prison, no? I hacked the prison network system to read information of the prisoners here previously. Are you also well-versed in computer networks and a hacker?" "I'm not a hacker, nor am I well-versed in networks," Tang Xiao shook his head. "It's just that you're gifted and I think for you to stay here is quite a pity. Maybe I'll tell you more if you get out of prison." Having said that, he could see that Tang Xiao didn't have the intention to show his special ability, so he directly ignored him. Then he turned around to look at Subduing and sneered, "Stay obediently there and don't mess with me, else those 4 can teach you a lesson. Grandma told me once that a wise man must know when to sit back when the odds are against him," replied Subduing as he slumped down to sit on the side and stretched his hands against the bed leg. Tang Xiao nodded with satisfaction and turned around to walk to the front of the cell. He then heavily kicked the cell door as 2 prison guards rushed over in just a few seconds. One of them used his electric baton to slam the iron window and shouted, "Stay still and be quiet." "I want to see the prisoner in front," said Tang Xiao. "You what?" The 2 prison guards outside were shocked, watching Tang Xiao as though he was a lunatic. They were not the only ones, of course, as the old inmates of the cell 18 were similarly looking at Tang Xiao like he was a madman. Is this guy looking for death? The same thought emerged in their minds as everyone in the entire prison knew that the cell in front was cell 1, a cell that only detained 1 inmate. That was the fellow that could be called the devil himself. Spectre. Up till now, no one dared to enter that cell. Those who had gone in before had all turned into corpses. Chapter 830, Rubbing and Pinching. Subduing had just been detained in this prison, so he naturally was unaware of who was staying in cell 1. He looked at the vacant expressions on everyone's faces and asked aloud, "Why do all of you have such an expression? Do you think that there's no way Xiao is getting out of this place?" Old Angie glanced at him and said, "Every prisoner being detained here is equal to a bird whose wings have been cut off, or a poisonous snake whose fangs have been broken and lost its freedom. Hence, Xiao is just making a joke. He won't be able to go out this cell 18 to have some exercise or fresh air. As for another reason, that cell in front is cell 1. There's only one path for those who enter it, death. Even the prison guards are no exception." "No kidding. Is that cell holding some kind of monster or something?" asked Subduing incredulously. "It's not a monster," replied old Angie. "It's a devil." Tang Xiao couldn't help but laugh and said, "To tell you the truth, I may be afraid of some things, but never the devil. Hey, the 2 of you, open this cell door. I gotta go to cell number 1 in front. I wanna see that devil." The 2 prison guards had received Sanders' order to allow Tang Xiao to move around in the prison, albeit only a small range. They exchanged words in a whisper for a short while before one of them took out the key and opened the prison cell door and said, "If that devil from cell 1 throws your corpse out, we'll collect your dead body for you by then." Tang Xiao couldn't help but smile. He headed out of the cell under the watchful eyes of the tongue-tied and dumbfounded others, then went straight to the door of the opposite cell. Cell 1 was very large, at least 50 square meters in size. There was only one bed inside, a fancy and high-quality mattress. There were also a variety of home appliances inside that made it feel like a small room and not a prison cell. Inside the cell now, Specter was lying on the bed with a book covering his face. It was unknown whether he was asleep. Tang Xiao walked forward to reach a chair and took it. He then directly took a seat 2+ meters away from the bed. He then crossed his legs before he picked up the half-pack of cigarettes and took one and ignited it. He shook his head after blowing out a cloud of smoke and said, "This cigarette is really disappointing and smells like shit." Specter's fingers moved but turned calm again shortly. However, a cold and detached voice came out from the book, "Smells like shit, huh? It can still make people know that they're still alive. You had better cherish that cigarette smoke. Nobody knows whether they can still puff out once more after one smoke." Tang Xiao couldn't help but chuckle and said, "Why do I feel like that you're not like the famous, legendary Devil Specter, but instead are a philosopher?" Pa. Specter lifted his hand to raise the book and directly threw it to the side. Then he sat on the bed, leaned his head and folded his arms, and watched Tang Xiao. He said with a pale smile, "You're very interesting, monsieur. At least you dare come to my place alone, the only one who dares to do so in the last 5 years, so I don't want to kill you now. Well, it seems like I have quite the charming personality, don't I?" Tang Xiao smiled. Specter's complexion turned chilly as a stream of wind suddenly erupted between his fingers. The half-pack of cigarettes that Tang Xiao put on the table were wrapped by the stream of wind before appearing in his hands. He took one of them and lit it up. After taking in some puffs and blowing the smoke out, only then did Specter inquire, "Let's have a chat. Why did you come here?" "I'm saving you and taking you out," answered Tang Xiao. As though he heard something extremely funny, Specter burst into laughter. "That's so fucking interesting. Someone wants to save me and take me out?" "Is that a problem?" asked Tang Xiao. Specter looked at Tang Xiao as though he was looking at an idiot and smilingly said, "Do you really think that I can't leave this place if I want to go out? You do have the ability to escape according to my men's narrative about you." Tang Xiao nodded and said, "I don't know why you keep staying here, but I believe that you'll end up following me. Also, I'm sure that you'll continue to work under me in the future." Specter squinted his eyes and suddenly swayed his arms as 3 sharp arrows made of wind shot at Tang Xiao's eyes and mouth. Tang Xiao just casually raised his hand and flicked his fingers, similarly releasing 3 streams of qi that shattered those wind arrows. Then he smiled and said, "I see, you turned out to be a wind elementalist, so you do have an ability to be proud of." Specter's countenance slightly changed. His body swayed and disappeared in a flash as his shadows revolved around Tang Xiao. The dense wind blades followed as the air suddenly turned dry and a bit hot as a purple-red flame appeared out of thin air, and wrapped around the wind blades. Die. The blazing wind blade with purple flame overwhelmingly swept towards Tang Xiao. Tang Xiao heavily punched his fist out. The overwhelming waves of qi spread out from his fist and formed a violent flux of energy which bombarded the blazing wind blades. In the air, the steel chair Tang Xiao was sitting on fell apart, whereas Specter's bed also blasted into pieces while the violent energy flux came blasting into Specter's chest. Boom. The reinforced concrete wall now had a hole in it. The 2 prisoners in the cell next to cell 1 were dumbfounded and slack-jawed as they saw Specter getting blown away. "I didn't expect the quality of this wall to be this bad though." Tang Xiao shook his head while smiling. Cough, cough. Blood seeped out of the corners of Specter's mouth while his eyes were filled with a dignified look. He tightly stared at Tang Xiao and asked, "Who the hell are you, and where did you come from?" "Spare the nonsense of where I come from, shall we?" Tang Xiao waved his hand and said, "We've come to visit these 2 gentlemen. You shall wait for me to pack them up and make them docile before I continue beating you up." "Well, you 2 should be Amos and Amosai, aren't you?" The two fire elementalists? Amos and Ammonite exchanged glances, and the former snorted and asked, "Who the fuck are you?" "The law can't sentence you to death, but I can easily kill you," directly announced Tang Xiao. "So, I'll give you a chance to submit to me and be my loyal men later. I can take you outside if you want, but if you don't agree, I'll torture you and make you suffer many days and nights before I kill you." Fucking arrogant. Amosai roared angrily and waved his hands as two fire serpents instantly appeared and wrapped around his arms. Layers of flame immediately hurled toward Tang Xiao as the two fire serpents blazed back and forth in an attempt to kill Tang Xiao. Exterminate. After Tang Xiao formed a seal, the fire in the surrounding air instantly disappeared. Amosai's face drastically changed as the flame and his fire serpents dissolved and vanished without a trace. Impossible. Amosai desperately tried to sense the element of fire, but to his horror, he could no longer feel the least bit of fire energy. Being unable to sense the fire element energy meant that he couldn't use his superpower at all. Amos could also sense it as well. He ended up like Amosai, unable to sense the existence of the fire element at all. The strange situation struck him with horror and made him flustered. He stared tightly at Tang Xiao and fiercely shouted, "How the hell did you do it?" "I can easily control the world's energy as long as I want to use it," Tang Xiao sneered. "If I don't want to make them exist, not even elementalists such as you can even think about using them. Now tell me, are you willing to submit to me?" "That's impossible," shouted Amos and Amosai in unison. Tang Xiao didn't ask again and released a violent pressing aura. His figure instantly dashed in front of the duo as his lightning-like fists bombarded the two men one after another. They might be very powerful, but they had no powers left, leaving the duo unable to fight back the barrage of Tang Xiao's strikes. Aarg. Aarg. Their shrill screams came spreading out from cell number 2. All the prisoners and prison guards within 100 meters could hear them very clearly. Yet none of these prison guards came rushing as they had been ordered from the top to ignore everything regardless of whatever the issue was. Inside the prison monitoring room, Sander stared fixedly at the surveillance screen, a look of horror on his face. Outsiders might be unaware of how powerful Amos and Amosai were, but he was crystal clear about the duo. These two brothers were second only to the most horrifying existence, Specter, hence, they were detained in cell number 2. And yet, these two dreadful men were unexpectedly beaten by Tang Xiao and even screamed out miserably. This made him look at Tang Xiao through the surveillance screen like he was watching some freaking monster. "Is this guy a damned devil or something, Warden? How can he be that powerful?" asked the prison guard with a shocked face. Sander narrowed his eyes all of a sudden as he pulled out a sharp knife and stabbed the prison guard's heart. The two guards behind him also moved in that instant and killed the other two in the surveillance room. In just a few seconds, they already killed all the 3 prison guards inside the room. "Call our men to come here and keep this monitoring room under our control. No matter what happens in the surveillance footage, it can't be known to outsiders," ordered Sander with all seriousness. "Understood." The 2 prison guards immediately nodded. Inside cell 2, Tang Xiao was still savagely beating Amos and Amosai and kept at it for several minutes more. Only after the duo was badly bruised and beaten did he finally stop and kick them to the corner. Then he asked coldly, "Now tell me, are you willing to pledge your loyalty to me in the future?" The duo still didn't answer because they didn't want to serve under anyone else. "If so, then I'll keep beating you up," Tang Xiao said. "Rest assured, though. You'll be able to endure my beatings for a day and a night. Even if you two are made of steel, I'll turn you into a steel juice. And by the way, I forgot to tell you, you won't die even if I savagely beat you for days and nights. One of my identities is that of a powerful doctor." Bam. Bam. As his voice faded away, Tang Xiao began the beating session again. He even used both his hands and feet. After several minutes he kicked the duo into cell 000001. But Specter frowned deeply, tons of thoughts churning inside his mind as he watched Tang Xiao beating the two brothers Amos and Amos Sai.